As we stepped out of the Stylight's arms, Poirot lightly caught my arm and guided me aside. I knew at once what he intended. He was waiting for Scotland Yard. Moments later, the two men emerged from the doorway. Poirot straightened, stepped forward, and addressed the shorter of the pair with quiet confidence. "I fear, Inspector Japp, that my face does not immediately return to your memory." The reaction was instantaneous. "Well, I'll be Mr. Poirot," Japp exclaimed, breaking into a broad grin. He turned to his companion. "You've heard me talk about him, haven't you? We worked together back in 1904, the Abercrombie forgery. Brussels job, and before that, do you remember the so-called Baron Altara, a slippery devil if ever there was one, slipped through half of Europe's police forces, until Antwerp, until this gentleman." As the two men traded warm recollections, I stepped closer and was formally introduced. First to Detective Inspector James Japp, then to his colleague, Superintendent Summerhay. "I hardly need to ask why you're here," Poirot observed mildly. Japp gave a knowing half-wink. "No need at all, looks pretty open and shut to me." Poirot's expression did not change. "On that point, Inspector, I must disagree." Summerhay spoke for the first time, his tone blunt and assured. "Disagree? Come now, the fellow's practically caught in the act. If ever there was a clearer case, I've yet to see it. I can't fathom how he managed to blunder so badly." But Japp was watching Poirot closely now, his humor fading into curiosity. "Easy there, Summerhay. Me and Monsieur Poirot go back a long way, and I'll say this, there's no man alive whose judgment I'd trust more. If he says there's more here, there is. Isn't that right, Monsieur? You've got something brewing." Poirot smiled faintly. "I have reached certain conclusions, yes." Summerhay remained unconvinced, but Japp continued thoughtfully. "This is how I see it. So far, the Yard's only had the outside view. That's always the trouble in cases like this, everything breaks after the inquest. Whoever's on the ground first has the advantage, that's been you. We wouldn't even be here yet if a sharp-eyed doctor hadn't tipped us off through the coroner. You've seen things from the start, little details, maybe. Now on paper, Inglethorpe's guilty as sin. If anyone but you suggested otherwise, I'd laugh them out of the room. Frankly, I was surprised the jury didn't pin willful murder on him straight away. Only reason they didn't was the coroner kept reining them in." "Perhaps," Poirot suggested softly, "you already have a warrant prepared." A shudder came down over Japp's face, the official mask sliding neatly into place. "Perhaps I do, perhaps I don't." Poirot studied him. "I am extremely anxious, gentlemen, that Mr. Inglethorpe should not be arrested." Summerhay gave a sharp, disbelieving snort. Japp looked torn between amusement and bafflement. "Can you give me something more than that, Mr. Poirot? A hint, at least. We don't want to make a mistake, but I need something solid." Poirot inclined his head. "Exactly my thought. Then hear this, go ahead, arrest Mr. Inglethorpe, but you will gain nothing by it. The case will collapse instantly." He snapped his fingers, just like that. Japp's expression darkened. Summerhay scoffed openly. As for me, I stood frozen. If Poirot wasn't mad, then the world had suddenly stopped making sense. Japp pulled out his handkerchief and dabbed his forehead. "I can't risk it on your word alone, even yours. There are people above me who will demand answers. Give me something I can take back with me." Poirot paused, weighing the moment. "It can be done," he said slowly. "Though I regret it, I wish to proceed quietly for now. But you are right, a Belgian policeman of yesterday carries little authority, and Alfred Inglethorpe must not be arrested, that I have sworn, so go to Styles." "We will in about half an hour. We're seeing the coroner and the doctor first." "Excellent, call for me on your way, the last house in the village. I will accompany you. At Styles, Mr. Inglethorpe will either give you what you need, or if he refuses, as I expect, I shall provide proof so decisive that no charge against him can stand. Do we agree?" Japp extended his hand. "That's a deal, and speaking for the Yard, I thank you. Though I'll admit I can't yet spot a single crack in the case. You always were extraordinary, until later, Monsieur." They walked away, Summerhay shaking his head with a crooked grin. Poirot turned to me at once, eyes alight. "Well, what do you think, my friend? Mon Dieu, those moments in court were warm. I never imagined the man would choose silence. It was the strategy of a fool." "There may be other explanations," I said carefully. "If he truly is guilty, silence may be the only shield left to him." Poirot laughed outright. Shield, there are 1,000 clever lies he might have told. I could invent 7 convincing confessions before dinner, and each far better than his stonewalling. I couldn't help laughing. I don't doubt it, but tell me honestly, after all we heard, do you truly still believe Inglethorpe may be innocent? Why not? Poirot replied calmly. Nothing has altered. The evidence is overwhelming. Yes, he said softly, too overwhelming. We turned through the gate of Leastway's cottage and climbed the familiar stairs. Yes, far too perfect, Poirot murmured. Real evidence is messy, incomplete, it resists. This has been manufactured, crafted with care, and in that care the criminal has overreached. I waited. Think of it, he went on. A man decides to poison his wife. He lives by his wits, so what does he do? He buys poison openly under his own name with a childish excuse. He delays using it. He engineers a public quarrel that throws suspicion squarely on himself. He prepares no alibi, no defense. He knows the chemist must speak. Bah, only a madman, one who longs for the gallows, would act so. Still, I don't see, I began. Nor do I, Poirot burst out. And that is what troubles me, Hercule Poirot. But then how do you explain the strychnine? Simply, he never bought it. But Mace recognized him. No, he recognized a man with a black beard, with glasses, with conspicuous clothes. He recognized a silhouette. Remember, he had been in the village barely 2 weeks. He knew Mr. Inglethorpe only by sight. That is not recognition, that is assumption. I leaned closer. Then you believe. My friend, Poirot said quietly, fixing me with that intent gaze of his, do you recall the 2 details I told you were vital? Forget the first for now. What was the second? I searched my memory. That Alfred Inglethorpe is instantly recognizable. His odd clothes, the dark beard, the spectacles, I replied. Precisely, he nodded, satisfied. Now imagine this, if someone wished to impersonate John Cavendish or Lawrence, would that be simple? No, I said slowly, unless the man were a skilled actor. Poirot cut in sharply, his hand slicing the air. And why would it not be simple? Because both men are clean-shaven. To convincingly copy either of them in full daylight would require a brilliant actor and a natural likeness to begin with. But Alfred Inglethorpe, he leaned closer, lowering his voice. Ah, that is another matter entirely. His appearance does the work for you. The clothes announce him. The beard transforms him. The glasses hide the eyes. These are the features people remember. He began pacing the room, warming to his theme. Now ask yourself, what is the criminal's first instinct? To draw suspicion away from himself, and how is that best achieved? By fastening it firmly onto another person. In this case, fate provided the perfect candidate. Everyone was already inclined to believe Inglethorpe guilty. Suspicion hovered around him from the start. All that was needed was a solid, tangible fact to seal it. Something undeniable, like the purchase of poison. Poirot stopped abruptly and faced me. And with a man as distinctive as Inglethorpe, that task becomes almost effortless. Remember young Mace, the chemist's assistant. He had never actually spoken with Inglethorpe. He had no reason to doubt that the man wearing those unmistakable clothes with that beard and those spectacles was Alfred Inglethorpe himself. It sounds plausible, I admitted, caught up in the momentum of his argument. But if that's true, why won't Inglethorpe say where he was at 6 o'clock on Monday evening? Poirot's excitement cooled at once. His shoulders dropped slightly. Ah, why indeed, he murmured. If he were arrested, he would speak soon enough, but I wish to avoid that moment. He must first understand how grave his position truly is. There is something shameful behind that silence. If he did not kill his wife, he is still no innocent lamb. He is hiding something separate from the murder. What could it possibly be? I asked. Though I was beginning to see Poirot's reasoning, a stubborn part of me still clung to the obvious explanation. Poirot smiled faintly. You cannot guess. No, can you? Oh yes, I had a suspicion some time ago, and events have confirmed it. You never said a word, I protested. He spread his hands with a small shrug. Forgive me, mon ami, at the time you were not exactly receptive. Then his tone sharpened. But tell me, do you see now why he must not be arrested? Perhaps, I said, unconvinced. To be honest, Inglethorpe's fate stirred little sympathy in me. A sharp scare might even do him good. Poirot read my expression and sighed. Very well, let us put him aside for the moment. Tell me, how did the evidence at the inquest strike you overall? About as I expected, I replied. Nothing seemed unusual to you. My thoughts flew at once to Mary Cavendish, and I answered cautiously. In what sense? For example, Lawrence Cavendish's testimony. Relief washed over me. Oh, Lawrence, no, he's always high-strung, nervous by nature. Poirot raised an eyebrow. And his suggestion that his mother may have died accidentally from the tonic she was taking, did that not strike you as odd? Not really, I said. The doctors dismissed it, of course, but it seemed a natural guess for a non-professional. But Lawrence is not a non-professional, Poirot reminded me gently. You yourself told me he studied medicine. He holds a degree. I stared at him. That's true, I hadn't thought of it that way. A chill crept in. It is strange. From the beginning, his conduct has been peculiar, Poirot went on. Of everyone in the household, he alone might recognize the signs of strychnine poisoning, yet he is the only one who insists most strongly on a natural cause of death. Had John said it, I could understand. John lacks technical knowledge and imagination, but Lawrence? Poirot shook his head. No, and today he advances a theory he must know is absurd. There is meaning in that, my friend. It's all terribly confusing, I admitted. And then there is Mrs. Cavendish, Poirot continued. Another who withholds part of the truth. What do you make of her behavior? I can't make sense of it, I said honestly. It seems impossible that she would protect Alfred Inglethorpe, and yet that is exactly how it appears. Poirot nodded thoughtfully. Yes, one thing is certain, she overheard far more of that private conversation than she was willing to admit. And yet she's the last person one would suspect of deliberately listening in. Exactly so, Poirot's eyes gleamed. But her testimony revealed something else. I was mistaken before. Dorcas was right. The quarrel occurred earlier in the afternoon, around 4 o'clock. I looked at him, puzzled. I had never understood why that detail mattered so much to him. A great many curious points surfaced today, Poirot went on. Take Dr. Bauerstein, for instance. Why was he awake and fully dressed at such an early hour? I find it remarkable that no one remarked upon it. He suffers from insomnia, I believe, I said uncertainly. Poirot's lips twitched. An explanation that is either extremely convenient or dangerously vague. It explains everything and nothing. I shall be watching our clever doctor very closely. Any other flaws you care to find? I asked, half joking. Poirot turned serious at once. When people are not telling the truth, my friend, be on your guard. Unless I am greatly mistaken, at today's inquest only one, perhaps two, people spoke with complete honesty. Oh, come now, Poirot, I exclaimed. I won't argue for Lawrence or Mrs. Cavendish, but John and Miss Howard, surely they were truthful. Both, he said softly. One, yes, but both. The words struck me like a blow. Miss Howard's blunt, straightforward testimony had seemed above suspicion. Still, I respected Poirot's instincts, even when I thought him obstinate to the point of folly. Do you truly believe that? I asked. Miss Howard has always struck me as painfully honest. Poirot gave me a look I could not decipher, as though he were on the verge of saying more, and decided against it. And Miss Murdoch, I added quickly, there's nothing deceptive about her. No, he agreed, but it is curious that she heard nothing at all, sleeping in the next room, while Mrs. Cavendish, in another wing of the house, distinctly heard the table fall. She's young, I said. She sleeps deeply. Ah, yes, Poirot murmured dryly. A remarkably deep sleeper, that one. I disliked the edge in his voice, but at that moment, a sharp knock echoed through the room. I glanced out the window and saw the two detectives waiting below. Poirot snatched up his hat, gave his mustache a fierce twist, brushed an imaginary speck of dust from his sleeve with deliberate care, and motioned for me to lead the way. Together, we went down to join the detectives, and set out once more for Styles. I think the arrival of the two Scotland Yard men hit the household like a sudden clap of thunder, John most of all. He had known, ever since the verdict, that this moment was inevitable. Still, theory and reality are very different things. Seeing the detectives standing there in flesh and blood stripped away any lingering illusion. This was no longer something that happened to other families. It was happening to us. As we climbed the stairs, Poirot spoke in low, measured tones with Inspector Japp. When we reached the landing, it was Japp who gave the instruction that everyone, except the servants, was to gather in the drawing room. At once, I understood the weight of it. Poirot had made a promise. Now he meant to prove it. I confess my own confidence wavered. Poirot might be utterly convinced of Alfred Inglethorpe's innocence, but men like Superintendent Summerhay were not swayed by intuition or brilliance. They demanded hard facts, proof you could hold in your hands, and I wasn't at all certain Poirot could deliver what they would require. Before long, we filed into the drawing room together. Japp closed the door with a decisive click that sounded final, almost ominous. Poirot moved about courteously, arranging chairs, ensuring everyone was seated. Yet no one's eyes followed him. All attention was fixed on the two Scotland Yard men. For the first time, I think the truth fully landed on us. This was not a nightmare we would wake from. It was real. We had all read the stories before. Now we were inside one. By morning, the headlines would scream from every newspaper stand in England. Mysterious tragedy in Essex. Wealthy woman poisoned AT country estate. There would be photographs of Styles, grainy images of us leaving the inquest. The village photographer had already been busy. All those familiar phrases, the ones you skim past when they involve strangers, now applied to us. A murder had been committed in this house. Sitting only feet away were the detectives in charge of the case. The hollow, polished language of crime reporting raced through my mind as we waited for someone to speak. What surprised everyone was that it wasn't one of the officials who began, but Poirot. He rose, bowed slightly, almost theatrically, like a lecturer addressing an expectant audience. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said smoothly, "I have asked you all to assemble here for one reason. That reason concerns Mr. Alfred Inglethorpe." Inglethorpe was seated a little apart from the rest. Whether consciously or not, everyone had edged their chairs away from him. At the sound of his name, he flinched. "Mr. Inglethorpe," Poirot continued, fixing him with a steady gaze, "there is a very dark presence hanging over this house, the presence of murder." Inglethorpe shook his head weakly. "My poor wife," he murmured. "Poor Emily, it is dreadful." "I do not think," Poirot replied sharply, "that you fully grasp just how dreadful it may become for you." Then, seeing Inglethorpe's confusion, he added slowly, deliberately, "Mr. Inglethorpe, you are in serious danger." The two detectives shifted uneasily. I could almost hear the formal warning, "Anything you say may be used against you," trembling on Summerhay's tongue. Poirot pressed on. "Do you understand me now, monsieur?" Inglethorpe looked up. "No, what are you saying?" "I am saying this," Poirot replied, his voice cutting clean through the room. "You are suspected of murdering your wife." A sharp intake of breath rippled through the circle. "Good God," Inglethorpe leapt to his feet. "That's insane. I poisoned Emily, the woman I adored." Poirot studied him closely. "You do not seem to realize how damaging your testimony at the inquest was. Knowing what I have told you now, will you still refuse to explain where you were at 6 o'clock on Monday afternoon?" With a sound halfway between a sob and a groan, Inglethorpe collapsed back into his chair and covered his face with his hands. Poirot stepped forward and stood over him, commanding. "Speak," he said sternly. Slowly, painfully, Inglethorpe lifted his head. Then, with grim resolve, he shook it. "You still refuse?" "Yes," he said hoarsely. "I cannot believe anyone would accuse me of such a crime." Poirot nodded once, as though confirming a final decision. "So be it," he said quietly. "Then I will speak for you." Inglethorpe shot upright again. "You, how could you possibly, you don't know," he stopped short. Poirot turned to face the room, his presence suddenly immense. "Ladies and gentlemen," he declared, "listen carefully. I, Hercule Poirot, state this without hesitation. The man who entered the chemist's shop and purchased strychnine at 6 o'clock last Monday was not Alfred Inglethorpe." A stunned silence followed. "At that very hour," Poirot went on, "Mr. Inglethorpe was accompanying Mrs. Raikes back to her home from a nearby farm. I can produce no fewer than 5 witnesses who saw them together at 6 o'clock, or shortly after. And you will remember that Abbey Farm, Mrs. Raikes' residence, lies more than 2.5 miles from the village." He paused, letting the words sink in. "There is no doubt, no ambiguity. Mr. Inglethorpe's alibi is absolute." For a heartbeat, no one moved. The room seemed frozen in disbelief. Of all of us, Inspector Japp recovered first, and even he looked impressed. "Well, I'll be damned," he exclaimed. "You really are the real thing, Mr. Poirot, and these witnesses of yours, solid, are they?" Poirot inclined his head with quiet confidence. "Absolutely. I have their names and addresses prepared. Naturally, you will verify everything, but you will find no flaw." "I don't doubt it for a second," Japp replied, lowering his voice. "You've saved us from making a first-class blunder. Arresting him would have been a complete mess." He turned to Inglethorpe. "But tell me, sir, why on earth didn't you say all this at the inquest?" "I can answer that," Poirot cut in smoothly. "There was a certain rumor." "A vile lie," Inglethorpe burst out nervously. "Completely false." "And one Mr. Inglethorpe was anxious not to revive," Poirot continued calmly. "Especially at such a time, isn't that so?" "Yes," Inglethorpe said quickly. "With my dear Emily not even laid to rest, how could I allow fresh slander to surface?" Japp shook his head. "Between you and me, sir, I'd take all the gossip in the world over being hauled off for murder, and I reckon your wife would have agreed. If it weren't for Mr. Poirot here, you'd be under arrest already, no question." "I admit I was foolish," Inglethorpe murmured, "but you don't know how I've been hounded, misjudged." His eyes flicked sharply toward Evelyn Howard. Japp wasted no time. "Right then," he said briskly to John, "I'd like to inspect the bedroom next, and after that I'll speak with the servants. Don't concern yourself, we'll take it from here. Mr. Poirot will guide us." As they left the room, Poirot caught my eye and motioned for me to follow him upstairs. Once there, he seized my arm and pulled me aside. Quickly, he whispered, "Go to the other wing, stand just before the baize door, do not move, no matter what, until I come back." And with that, he turned and rejoined the detectives. I obeyed, though utterly baffled, and stationed myself by the baize door. What exactly was I guarding? Why this precise spot? I stared down the corridor. Every bedroom except Cynthia Murdoch's was in this wing. Was that the key? Was I meant to observe who passed through? I waited. Time stretched. Nothing stirred. No footsteps. No sounds. Nearly 20 minutes passed before Poirot returned. "You didn't move?" he asked sharply. "Not an inch," I said. "Nothing happened." Ah, his expression was unreadable. "You saw nothing?" "No." "But surely you heard something. A loud crash, perhaps, a heavy fall." "No, nothing at all." "Impossible," Poirot groaned. "I am annoyed with myself, truly annoyed. I made only the smallest motion. I knew those gestures well, with my left hand, and the bedside table went flying." He looked so crestfallen, so genuinely upset that I hurried to reassure him. "Never mind, old fellow, what does it matter? You were magnificent downstairs. The reveal shocked everyone. Clearly there's far more to this business with Mrs. Raikes than we ever suspected, enough to keep Inglethorpe silent at all costs. What now? Where have the yard men gone?" "To interrogate the servants. I showed them all the physical evidence. Honestly, Japp disappoints me, no system at all." Just then I glanced out the window. "Look, Dr. Bauerstein's coming. I'm with you, Poirot. There's something off about that man." "He is very intelligent," Poirot said thoughtfully. "Too intelligent? I was rather pleased to see the state he was in on Tuesday. You should have seen him, covered in mud from head to toe like a scarecrow." "You saw him that night?" "Yes, he didn't want to come inside. It was after dinner, but Inglethorpe insisted." "What?" Poirot grabbed my shoulders with startling force. "Dr. Bauerstein was here Tuesday night, here, and you never told me. Why didn't you tell me? Why?" He was beside himself. "My dear Poirot," I protested, "I had no idea it mattered. I didn't think it was important." "Important?" he cried. "It is vital, of the highest importance. Bauerstein was here the night of the murder, Hastings, can you not see? That changes everything." I had never seen him so shaken. Releasing me, he mechanically straightened a pair of candlesticks, murmuring over and over, "Yes, everything." Suddenly, his manner snapped into focus. "Come," he said sharply. "We act now. Where is Mr. Cavendish?" John was in the smoking room. Poirot went straight to him. "Mr. Cavendish, I must go to Tadminster immediately. A crucial lead. May I use your motor?" "Of course, at once." "Yes, if you please." John rang for the car. 10 minutes later, we were tearing down the drive, racing through the park and onto the open road. "Now, Poirot," I said at last, "perhaps you'll explain what's going on." "Well, my friend, much you can deduce already. With Inglethorpe cleared, the entire case shifts. We face a new puzzle altogether. We now know one person did not buy the poison. The false trail is gone. Now we seek the truth." He continued steadily. "Anyone in the house, except Mrs. Cavendish, who was playing tennis with you, could have impersonated Inglethorpe on Monday evening, and his statement about setting down the coffee in the hall, overlooked at the inquest, now becomes critical. Someone took that coffee to Mrs. Inglethorpe, or someone passed through the hall while it waited there. From what you've told me, only two people can be excluded beyond doubt, Mrs. Cavendish and Mademoiselle Cynthia." Yes, I said, relief flooding through me. Mary was safe from suspicion. In saving Inglethorpe, Poirot went on, I was forced to reveal my hand earlier than planned. The real criminal will now be alert, twice as careful. He turned to me suddenly. And you, Hastings, do you suspect anyone? I hesitated. A wild thought had flickered through my mind earlier. Ridiculous, I told myself, yet it wouldn't quite disappear. It's hardly a suspicion, I admitted. It sounds foolish. Speak, Poirot urged gently. Instincts matter. Well then, I blurted out, I think Miss Howard isn't telling everything. Miss Howard? Yes, you'll laugh. Not at all, go on. We've dismissed her too easily because she was away, but she was only 15 miles off. A car could cover that quickly. Can we be absolutely sure she wasn't at Styles that night? Yes, Poirot replied calmly. I confirmed it myself. I telephoned the hospital. She worked the afternoon shift, and when an unexpected convoy arrived, she volunteered for night duty. She never left. Oh, I said, deflated. Still, her hatred of Inglethorpe is so extreme. That's what started the idea. I wondered if she might know something about the will, perhaps destroyed the wrong one. She's fiercely bitter. You think her vehemence unnatural? Yes, almost unbalanced. Poirot shook his head decisively. No, Miss Howard is solid, strong, entirely sane, English muscle and honesty. But you are right about one thing, her hatred is excessive. You are wrong only in what you infer from it. He paused, then added, and there is one absolute reason she cannot be the murderer. And that is, Mrs. Inglethorpe's death could never benefit her, and there is no murder without motive. I fell silent, thinking hard. Couldn't Mrs. Inglethorpe have written a will that benefited her? I pressed. Poirot answered before I'd even finished the thought. He gave a sharp, decisive shake of the head. But you raised that very idea with Mr. Wells, I protested. You practically planted it there. A small, knowing smile touched Poirot's lips. Precisely, and that was done with care. I wished to introduce the idea without revealing the name that truly concerned me. Miss Howard stood in a similar enough position to serve as a substitute, so I let her name do the work instead. I frowned, unconvinced. Still, it's possible, isn't it? That will written the afternoon she died, surely it could. Poirot's head moved again, this time so forcefully that it stopped me cold. No, my friend, on that point I am certain. I have my own private conclusions about that document, and I can assure you of this much. It did not leave anything to Miss Howard. I accepted his statement, though inwardly I couldn't imagine how he could be so completely sure. Well, I said at last, letting out a breath, then Miss Howard is cleared. Though I'll say this, you're partly responsible for my suspicion in the first place. What you said about her testimony at the inquest put the idea in my head. Poirot blinked, genuinely puzzled. What did I say about her testimony? Don't you remember, when I named her and John Cavendish as beyond suspicion? Oh yes, of course. For a fraction of a second he looked oddly unsettled, then recovered smoothly. Ah, but speaking of suspicions, Hastings, there is something I require you to do for me. Anything, I replied. What is it? The next time you find yourself alone with Lawrence Cavendish, you must say exactly this. I bring you a message from Poirot. He says, find the extra coffee cup and you may sleep peacefully. Nothing more, nothing less. I stared at him. Find the extra coffee cup and you may sleep peacefully. Have I got that right? Perfect. But what on earth does it mean? That, Poirot said lightly, I leave to your intelligence. You know the facts as well as I do. Say it to him and watch carefully how he reacts. I will, I agreed, though unease prickled at me. But I can't deny it sounds disturbingly cryptic. By then, the car was rolling into Tadminster. Poirot leaned forward and directed the driver to the shop marked Analytical Chemist. He was out of the car in an instant and disappeared inside. Minutes later, he returned, brushing his hands together. There, he said briskly, my errand is complete. I couldn't contain myself. What did you do in there? I deposited an item for analysis. Yes, but what item? The cocoa sample from the saucepan in the bedroom. I nearly laughed. But that's already been tested. Dr. Bauerstein had it examined, and you yourself dismissed the idea of strychnine being present. I am aware, Poirot replied calmly. I know exactly what Dr. Bauerstein did. Then why? Because I wish it tested again. That was all he would say. No argument, no explanation, nothing more could I extract from him. The entire business left me thoroughly perplexed. I could see no logic in retesting the cocoa. Still, my faith in Poirot, which had wavered earlier, was now firmly restored. His absolute certainty of Alfred Inglethorpe's innocence and his flawless proof of it had erased all my doubts. Mrs. Inglethorpe was laid to rest the next day. On Monday morning, I came down late for breakfast and found John waiting for me. He drew me aside at once. "Inglethorpe's leaving today," he said, "taking rooms at the Stylites Arms until he sorts himself out." He sighed heavily. "Honestly, Hastings, it's a relief. It was bad enough when we thought he'd murdered her, but now it's worse. We all feel like absolute brutes for turning on him. Things looked ugly, I'll grant you. Anyone would have drawn the same conclusions, but knowing we were wrong, it leaves a rotten taste. Makes you feel you ought to apologize, make things right. And that's damn awkward when you still can't stand the man." He shook his head. "I'm glad he had the sense to go, and thank God Styles wasn't left to him. I couldn't stomach the idea of him reigning over the place. He can have the money, no objection there." "You'll manage financially?" I asked. "Oh, we'll scrape by. Death duties will sting, of course, but half my father's estate stays with the house. Lawrence is remaining with us for now, so there's his share too. It'll be tight, especially with my own debts, but creditors grow patient when death's involved." With Inglethorpe's departure looming, the atmosphere at breakfast was the lightest it had been since the tragedy. Cynthia's natural brightness had returned. She looked young and alive again. We were all quietly hopeful. Everyone, that is, except Lawrence, who sat withdrawn, his face shadowed by nerves and gloom. The newspapers, however, were merciless. Sensational headlines screamed from every page. Each of us had been dissected in print, our lives summarized, motives hinted at, suspicion cleverly implied. With the war at a lull, the press had seized eagerly on the scandal. The mysterious affair ATSDYLES dominated the conversation everywhere. Reporters swarmed the grounds daily. Though denied entry, they lurked near the gates and hedges, cameras poised, waiting for any one of us to slip outside. Scotland Yard officers came and went, sharp-eyed, silent, probing. Whether they had a real lead or were circling blindly, none of us knew. Later that morning, Dorcas approached me with unusual secrecy. "Begging your pardon, sir," she whispered, "but might I have a word?" "Of course, Dorcas, what is it?" "Well, sir, you may be seeing the Belgian gentleman today," I nodded. "You recall how particular he was about a green dress." "Yes, have you found one?" "Not exactly, sir, but I remembered the dressing-up chest, the one the young gentleman used years back. It's in the front attic, full of old costumes. It struck me there might be a green dress among them." "That's worth mentioning," I said. "I'll tell him." She brightened. "Thank you kindly, sir. Such a polite gentleman he is, not like those London detectives poking about. I don't trust foreigners much as a rule, but from what I read, these Belgian fellows are different, and he's always so respectful." As Dorcas stood there, earnest and loyal, I was struck by how rare such servants had become. I decided to seek out Poirot at once, but met him halfway up the drive. I passed along Dorcas's suggestion immediately. "Ah, excellent, Dorcas," Poirot murmured. "Yes, we shall inspect the chest, although—" he paused, then waved the thought aside. "No matter, we will see." We slipped into the house through a window and made our way to the attic. The chest was exactly as Dorcas had described. Old, heavy, studded with brass, crammed full of theatrical relics. Poirot overturned it without ceremony, sending garments spilling across the floor. Greens appeared, faded, dark, bright, but each was dismissed with a shake of his head. His movements were unhurried, almost indifferent, as though he expected little. Then suddenly he froze. An exclamation escaped him. "What is it?" I asked sharply. "Look." The chest was almost bare now. At the very bottom, laid out as if deliberately placed, rested a striking black beard, thick, glossy, unmistakably theatrical. Poirot's eyes lit up. "Oh," he murmured softly, then again with satisfaction. "Oh." He lifted it carefully, turning it over between his fingers, inspecting the texture, the cut, the weight. "Brand new," he observed at last. "Yes, quite new." After a brief pause, he lowered it back into the chest, deliberately burying it beneath the discarded costumes, restoring everything exactly as it had been. Then, without another word, he straightened and strode out, heading downstairs with brisk purpose. We found Dorcas in the pantry, hard at work polishing the silver until it gleamed. Poirot greeted her with his usual old-world courtesy, then said pleasantly, "We've been examining the costume chest you mentioned, Dorcas. My thanks, it's a wonderful collection. Are the clothes still used much?" "Well, sir, not so much these days," she replied, brightening at once. "But every now and again the young gentlemen have what they call a dress-up night. Very amusing they are. Mr. Lawrence, oh, he's a marvel, makes you laugh till you cry. I'll never forget the night he came down dressed as the Shah of Persia, or something Eastern like that. He had a big paper knife and told me I'd better mind myself, or off would come my head with his sharpened scimitar." She chuckled at the memory. "And Miss Cynthia? Well, she was dressed as an Apache or some foreign ruffian. You'd never have recognized her. Such a pretty young lady turned into a regular villain." Poirot smiled indulgently. They must have enjoyed themselves greatly. And Mr. Lawrence, when he was this Persian king, did he wear a black beard like the one in the chest upstairs? "Oh yes, sir," Dorcas said readily. "He made one himself, borrowed 2 skeins of my black wool he did, looked very real from a distance, but I didn't know of any proper beard being up there, not until now. That must be quite recent. There was a red wig, I know, but no other hairpieces. Mostly they use burnt cork, messy stuff that. Miss Cynthia once blacked herself so thoroughly she couldn't get it off for days." "So," Poirot said thoughtfully as we stepped back into the hall, "Dorcas knows nothing of that beard." I leaned close. "Do you think it's the same one?" He nodded without hesitation. "I am sure of it. You noticed the trim." "I didn't. It was shaped precisely like Mr. Inglethorpe's beard. I even found tiny clipped hairs. Hastings, this affair runs deeper than it appears." "Who would hide it there?" I asked. "Someone clever," Poirot replied dryly. "Someone who chose the one hiding place where it would attract no notice at all. Yes, clever, but we must be cleverer, so clever that he never realizes we are clever." I agreed at once. "You will help me greatly, mon ami," Poirot added. I felt a surge of pride. There had been moments when I doubted whether Poirot truly valued my assistance. "Yes," he continued, studying me intently, "you will be indispensable." That was gratifying until he went on. "I require an ally within the house." "You have me," I said quickly. "Yes, but you are not enough." I could not hide my disappointment. Poirot hastened to clarify. "You misunderstand. You are known to be associated with me. I need someone whose connection to us is unsuspected." "John, perhaps?" "No." "He's honest," I mused, "but not especially sharp." Poirot's gaze shifted. "Miss Howard is approaching. She is ideal, though I fear I am not her favorite person since I cleared Mr. Inglethorpe. Still, we must attempt it." Miss Howard agreed, somewhat curtly, to spare a few minutes. We withdrew into the small morning room, and Poirot closed the door behind us. "Well," she demanded, "what is it now? Be quick." "Mademoiselle," Poirot began gently, "do you recall once offering me your assistance?" "Yes," she said briskly, "and I said I'd help you gladly to see Alfred Inglethorpe brought to justice." Poirot regarded her steadily. "I ask you now for honesty. Do you still believe Mrs. Inglethorpe was murdered by her husband?" She bristled. "Your clever explanations don't sway me. Fine, he didn't buy the strychnine, that proves nothing. He could have used soaked flypaper, just as I told you from the start." "That would be arsenic," Poirot noted mildly. "What does that matter?" she snapped. "Poison is poison. If I'm certain he killed her, the method means nothing." "Exactly," Poirot said quietly. "If you are certain, let me ask you this instead, deep down in your heart, did you ever truly believe he did it?" She flared. "Haven't I always called him a scoundrel? Haven't I always said he'd murder her one day? I hated him, always have." "Just so," Poirot replied. "That confirms my idea." "And what idea is that?" "Do you remember," Poirot asked softly, "saying that if someone you loved were murdered, you would know instinctively who was responsible, even if you couldn't prove it?" "Yes," she said firmly, "I believe that." "And yet," Poirot said, "your instinct does not accuse Alfred Inglethorpe." She stared at him. "What?" "You want him to be guilty, you believe him capable, but your instinct tells you he is not the murderer." He paused. "It tells you another name." Her hands flew up. "No, don't say it," she cried. "It's not true, it can't be. I don't know why such a terrible thought ever entered my mind." Her voice broke, and the room fell into a heavy, dreadful silence. "I'm right, aren't I?" Poirot asked quietly. "Yes, yes," Miss Howard burst out. "You'd have to be some kind of sorcerer to see that, but it can't be true, it's too horrible, too unthinkable. It has to be Alfred Inglethorpe." Poirot shook his head, slow and solemn. "Don't question me," she went on rapidly, her voice strained. "I won't speak of it. I won't even let myself believe it. I must be unbalanced to have entertained such a thought at all." Poirot inclined his head, perfectly calm. "I shall ask you nothing," he said. "It is enough that matters stand as I believed they did, and I too have my instincts. We are moving toward the same end, even if we do not name it." "Don't expect me to help you," she said fiercely. "I wouldn't raise a hand to," her voice failed her. "You will help me regardless," Poirot replied gently. "I require nothing from you, yet you will still be my ally. There is one thing you will do because you cannot prevent yourself from doing it." "And what is that?" "You will observe." Evelyn Howard lowered her head. "Yes," she admitted quietly. "That much is true. I am always watching, always hoping that what I fear will prove false." "If we are mistaken," Poirot said calmly, "no one will rejoice more than I, but if we are not, if we are right, then tell me, Miss Howard, where do you stand?" I don't know. Think carefully." "It could be kept quiet," she whispered. "Spare the world." "There must be no silence," Poirot said firmly. "But Emily herself," she stopped short. "Miss Howard," Poirot said gravely, "that is not worthy of you." She lifted her face from her hands. "Yes," she said slowly with new steadiness. "That was Evelyn Howard speaking." She straightened, pride blazing in her eyes. "This is Evelyn Howard, and she stands with justice, whatever the price." With that, she turned and left the room, her step firm and resolute. Poirot watched her go. "There," he said quietly, "walks a most valuable ally. That woman Hastings possesses both intelligence and heart." I said nothing. "Instinct," Poirot continued thoughtfully, "is a remarkable force. It cannot be reasoned away nor safely ignored." "You and Miss Howard seem to understand one another perfectly," I said stiffly. "You may not have noticed, but I understand nothing at all." "Is that so, mon ami?" he asked mildly. "It is, and I'd appreciate some clarity." Poirot regarded me for several seconds, then, to my astonishment, shook his head. "No. Oh, come now, why not?" "Because two people are quite sufficient to share a secret." "I think that's extremely unfair," I protested. "You're withholding information from me." "No," Poirot replied evenly. "Every fact I possess you possess as well. You are free to draw your own conclusions. This is not about facts. It is about ideas." "Still, I'd like to know." He looked at me with genuine regret and shook his head once more. "You see, Hastings," he said softly, "you lack instinct." "Just now you were praising intelligence," I reminded him. "The two," said Poirot mysteriously, "often walk together." The comment was so baffling that I did not bother to respond. But I resolved then and there that if I uncovered anything of real importance, as surely I would keep it to myself. There are moments in life when one must assert one's independence.